The last section in Chapter 1, Section 1.4, talks about types of biases. So samples that over or under emphasize characteristics of a population are said to be biased. And once you have bias within your sample, there's no way to fix it. Like once you've collected that data and you see, there's something biased in your methods, there's no way to then account for that bias. In our textbook, we talk about 6 types of biases. There's many more than this, but these are the 6 that we talk about in this chapter. So the first one is voluntary response bias, and this correlates with the voluntary response sampling method. And this is where people with really strong opinions, either for or against something, tend to be the only ones who respond. Sampling bias comes along with that convenience sampling, and that's where some portion of the population is significantly underrepresented. So if you're doing a survey and you decide to set up a table outside the cafe during lunchtime between 11 and 1, and you ask people passing by to fill out your survey. So this was convenient for you, but you're missing entire groups of students that only go to HCC in the evening time, students that only take online courses, students that don't go to the cafe for lunch. So you're missing entire groups of the population in this type of convenience sampling, and that's called sampling bias. We also have social acceptability bias, and this is where people are reluctant to admit to behavior that reflects negatively on them. So for example, if you put out a survey and ask people how much they weigh, people tend to underestimate how much they weigh. And it's not necessarily that they're trying to lie. They just, it's a sensitive subject within our culture, so people are reluctant to admit to exactly how much they weigh. Self-interest bias is when someone seeks out information and uses it in ways that advance their own self-interest. So this would be like a company that then does some kind of survey or sample or study, and it happens to support everything in their company, right? It should really be done, that kind of survey should be done outside of the company from somebody who doesn't have an interest, a self-interest in the results of that survey. Leading question bias is when questions are worded in a way that suggests a particular response. So instead of saying, rate this class on a scale from 1 to 5, I say, what makes this class so great? Please list the things that you liked, right? That's a leading question bias. It's really leading question. Non-response bias is when you have a large number of people that don't respond to the survey. You can't require people, you can't force people to respond to surveys. So, for example, if I put out a survey to the class and only 2 people responded to the survey, that would be a non-response bias. I just didn't have enough people respond. But if I put out a survey and I say that I will drop your lowest homework score if you fill out the survey, so I give some kind of incentive, and then 90% of the students fill out the survey, well, now I've accounted for that non-response bias. Some just quick notes when it comes to this. So sample size is important. But I think some people make the mistake that if they have a really, 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 really big sample size, that it will somehow reduce the amount of bias, and that's not necessarily the case. It also, sample size doesn't really have much to do with the population size. So whether the population is 2,000 or 2 million, if I have a sample of 300 people, that's a really good sample size, as long as that sample is representative of the population. And it's more important to try to account for biases than it is to get, hundreds of thousands of people to be involved in a sample. All right, that is the end of chapter 1. This was a long chapter. There's a lot of vocabulary, so make sure that you're taking good notes on those and reading the textbook.